Hello, Go Overseas fans, and welcome to another edition of Go Overseas Whiteboard Wednesdays. Today, we're going to be talking about teaching abroad, how to choose a country. So, let's set the stage here a little bit. You've decided that you're going to teach abroad, and now you have the difficult yet fun decision of choosing a country. So let's talk about the different factors that you probably have in mind, and everybody has in mind, when choosing a country, and help you break down what's most important to you, and then hopefully help you make a decision. Okay. So before we even start here, let me just say that this is different for everybody. It's an exciting decision. We talk to people all the time, and we have people posting on our message boards a lot who are kind of stressed out about this decision. But this is really a great opportunity. You're going to have one of the best years of your life, spending a year teaching abroad in a foreign country. So kind of embrace this, embrace the decision, and have fun in choosing which country that you're going to spend a whole year of your life in, which is a fun and an exciting thing to have happen. Okay, without further ado, let's jump into it. So the first thing that people usually think about, the first factor, is culture. And think about here what's really most important to you. What gets you excited? Are you really excited about the idea of spending a year in China and being totally immersed in Chinese culture and being exposed to all the different things that that means and the ways that it will challenge you as a person? Are you really excited about French culture, about German culture? What is it that you think about and dream about at night before you go to sleep, in the shower? What are the things that excite you? Whatever culture that is, well, that's important to you, and mark that down on your list. And that's going to be different for everybody, of course. Different people are excited and passionate about very different things. The second factor is language. So we can really break down language into a couple of different components or categories. There's practical languages, and then there's languages that you're just interested in. Now, practical languages, of course, would be Chinese, would be Spanish, maybe French, languages like that that large populations of the world speak, right? That can be very practical, potentially later for you in a full-time job and in your career. If you're interested in international business, international development, things like that, it's a practical skill that you can take with you. So that's one factor for language, but you might just want to learn something completely different. You might want to learn Latin, you might want to learn a more obscure language in Africa, whatever. Everyone's different, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? But what language is it that you want to learn? So that's a really important factor, and hopefully after spending a year in a country teaching abroad, you'll have learned a language, at least to a decent level of fluency, especially if you really dedicate yourself to it. So think about what language you want to learn, and that's related to culture in some ways, but it might not be. It might be something different. Okay, so the next factor that you'll want to consider is salary, or as we have here written, COLA, which is cost of living adjustment, which we'll talk about a little bit as well. Now, this is the category that I like the least, but we all have to think about it, right? Some of you have student loans. We all have bills to pay. So salary is important. It's something that we just have to think about. But there's a number of different ways to think about salary, right? You want to sit down and budget exactly the salary that you need to pay your bills back home if you have them. If you don't, you might have a lot more flexibility. But what you also want to think about when you're considering salary is the cost of living adjustment in the country that you're in. If you haven't lived abroad before, that might be something that's new to you. So let me give you a couple examples. Now let's say you're thinking about teaching in Japan or China. Now in Japan, you're definitely going to make a higher gross salary. In other words, you're going to make more money every month. However, you're also going to spend more money every month because if you've never been to Japan, and I have, it's a really interesting place. I highly recommend it. It's very expensive. Every meal costs more. Getting on the subway costs more. So your potential to save money at the end of the month is going to be substantially less in Japan than it would be in China, for example. So you don't want to just look at gross salary. A lot of people get stuck in gross salary. I need to make X amount of money per month. What you also want to look at is the cost of living of where you're going to be. That's important. So these are factors you want to consider as well when you're thinking about a country. Okay, great. Next, lifestyle. Lifestyle is a really important one. I think we can break this down into two different categories. There's city and there's rural lifestyle, right? And this can be significantly different because not only are you now adjusting to a different culture, but you're living in either potentially a very remote place where people don't speak English. So you really want to think carefully about what you can deal with on a day-to-day basis. Life in a rural area, if you're not used to it and you've never lived there before, can be very different. For example, if you're living in a major city in China, that's going to be very different than living in a rural area, just as it would be in any country in the world. In the U.S., for example, living in New York City as compared to living in Kansas, you're going to have a very, very different experience. So you want to think about what you want have your experience. Now, for example, if you live in a rural area, you're probably going to be immersed in the culture in a more significant way. That can be great. So it might be more challenging to live in a rural area, and most people feel that way, but you might learn the language better. You know, you might be exposed more to locals rather than being in a big city where you're still going to have other Westerners and English-speaking people around you. So these are other things to consider as well as you choose which city and which country you want to live in. Now, last but not least, wildcard. Now, wildcard can be a lot of different things for everybody, right? It could be if you really love scuba diving, and that could be more important than everything else on here. That could outweigh everything here, right? Because if you want to scuba dive, you're not going to want to live, for example, in Germany. You know, you're not going to want to teach there for a year. Or you're not going to probably want to teach in Japan for the year in a cold climate. You might want to teach in Thailand. If you love karaoke, you want to teach anywhere in Asia, because there's karaoke everywhere. If you haven't been exposed to that yet, well, you've got something to look forward to. But wildcard could be anything. I knew somebody who really was interested in European castles, and because of that, he needed to be in Europe, and specifically he wanted to be in Scotland, because there's apparently a lot of old castles in Scotland. So wildcard is whatever you're interested in, your personal interest, and that's exciting. Okay, so we've talked about the different factors here. Hopefully you've kept a little checklist or made some notes and related it to the decision that you're making in your life. Again, there's no right decision here. It's an exciting choice, so I hope that you embrace it, and good luck in whatever decision you make. Make sure when you do decide that you come back to Go Overseas, say hello, leave some advice on our message boards, and most importantly, review the programs that we have on our site. Now, on Go Overseas, of course, we list every teaching program in the world, along with ratings and reviews from people who've completed programs that you're probably thinking about right now. So go check those out. Make sure that you end up in a good school that's going to treat you well, and then come back and tell us about it on the website. Great. Thank you very much for watching another Whiteboard Wednesday. Have a good night, and see you next time.